Okay, so that was The Park, which was a film I made, let me think, 10 years ago. It was a film that was shown internationally, got quite a lot of good critical acclaim, won a few awards. It was shown in Russia, in Japan, in America, across the UK. Rather than like deconstructing the story of the film or the background to the film, I want to talk about the crew roles and the size of the crew and what we had to do to construct that film. So, if we go to the very start, obviously, as you see from the credits, I was a screenwriter, I'm a director. I had the script already, and the script, I was the original producer. And then, in terms of my organisational skills, I realised that, as a director, I had a vision for how the film should look, but in terms of the organisational structure and the financial structure of the film, I didn't have the skills as a producer. So I found another producer who was an award-winning producer from Salford, and he liked the script and was willing to raise the capital for the script. So we created a budget for the script, which was, I think, £14,000, and then we won money from the local arts council, and the producer sold his car as well. That's another story. So with the money, we started to put a crew together. So we assessed what we would need for this film and broke it down in terms of like the director's vision. And the film itself needed to be in a studio. For some of the shots that we'd planned, which were stylistic to the film, we needed to remove walls. So the whole room, the bedroom in which the film is contained in, was built in a studio in Salford. So we created 4 walls out of MDMF. We needed a production designer then to bring in to paint the walls, to get the look and the scene just right in terms of the lighting we wanted. So we went back to the cinematographer we were working with, because we were shooting this film on Super 16mm film, which in your lifetime you might never see, but 10 years ago it was an expensive format and it was a well-respected format. It was, on our price budget, the best you could get. Feature films were being shot on 35mm. So this was just a slightly smaller gauge film, but with a very high quality. In terms of a cinematographer, we discussed the style in terms of the theme of the film. We wanted the style and the theme of the film to reflect in the cinematography. So we wanted corners which were very dark. We wanted patches of light and dark. There's 2 specific scenes in the film, and there's 2 breaks, and these were shot slightly different with different film stock, with different lenses, with slightly different lighting. Again, I'll talk about the production design in future weeks, sticking to the crew roles and how the crew fit together. In terms of pulling off this style, we needed the cinematographer to work closely with the production designer, so the lighting and the production design all flowed to give us a seamless style in terms of what my vision was on that. And the producer's role then was to make sure the right people were selected to do this. So the producer at this point created a crew who could build the set, who had that experience, got a production designer in who could work with the cinematographer to build the set. Also a painter, in terms of where the boy looks out the window, in the background, that is an actual painted background rather than a real background, in terms of the dream sequence, in the non-dream sequences, sorry, and then the actual dream sequence when he looks out onto the live park. We basically picked a wall up and put it in a park in Salford, and this needed crew so grips in terms of moving lights, moving parts of the wall. We also needed security. So again, all these things need to be taken into account. So location scouts, location managers, caterers on site. Further from this, we needed a composer to make the incidental music for the film to fit with the film. So there was no copyright protection, it was our own music. An editor, so we had an editor who was working at Channel M in Salford. The sound recordist, we had 2 sound recordists on set. We had costume and makeup, because we had a young child working with us as well, we needed a chaperone for the child, and we were restricted to the amount of hours we could work. So you can see fairly quickly, the crew is building up quite large. So in terms of the pre-production stage, at this stage, I was working as the director on making sure the script was prepared, making sure the actors knew what they were doing, working with a cinematographer to get the look right, working with a production designer to make sure the colours all worked and they fit with the theme of the film. The producer at this point looked after the office and the paperwork, the finance, organised the transport, organised the catering, deliberated tasks to other people. So the assistant director on set really is a producer's right-hand person. The assistant director will often say shoot, action and cut. Okay, they're in charge of making sure timings on set are correct. So they'll organise timings for each scene, for each take, and give options to how many takes you're allowed to do in terms of how much time is available. And back then, we were working in terms of film stock, so time was money. The more time we spent, the more film stock which was burnt, the more we'd have to pay in buying more film, in processing, and then finally in professional editing time at the end, because the edit suites had to be hired. So these tasks from the producer were given out to different other members of the crew. So that was the assistant director who looked after the schedule, looked after the times, and the schedule was produced by the producer. And then the production manager who would look after everything on set and make sure things flowed, things that worked. The assistant, like the second assistant director, would look after background cast. In this way, there was no background cast included apart from on the park. So that was a very small job. Okay, so the third assistant director would be back in the office, organising call sheets, paperwork, making sure the crew are on time for the following day, making sure if there was any outside shoots, the weather was okay, organising transport for the following day, making sure the caterers know what they're doing, and then in the morning the shoot, if some people can't get out of bed in time, they would wake them up, give them a call, send a taxi for them, organise a coach to pick up crew, pick up actors, and essentially get everything organised in advance. And then the call sheet would go out at the end of each day, tell people the details of the next day, where they need to be, what they need to do, and perhaps a report of that day to give any updates on how the shoot went, what it looks like, any slight changes or any pickups. And pickups are when a shot maybe isn't right or it's not gone too well, you return to that shot and reshoot. Okay, so in terms of my own experience, that gives you a kind of a brief run through of where you start with a script to the way the crew builds up naturally and progressively. In terms of what you're doing in your films, management is the key. If you all decide to do a little bit each, things will fall apart. You need your role and you need to stick to that role. So if you're a camera operator, go out, research how to use the camera, look at films, watch films, look at great cinematographers, and we'll watch more great cinematography through the next few weeks. If you're a producer, think about how organised you are. If you're a director, think about what your vision is for the film, what kind of acting style you want. If you're a sound recordist, think about where you're going to stand to take sound. Also think about the background sound, the music, the overall soundscape of the film. Again, a lot of people really don't pay enough attention to sound. Sound is key and sound is critical to making your film a success. Essentially, don't underestimate any role. And then finally think about the director's vision and think about the work you do and how this flows into that vision. So make sure you understand narrative as well as the director. Don't think if you're on camera, yours is a purely technical role. You need to understand the type of story the script is telling, but also the type of story that the director is trying to tell through use of the camera. So how can you best serve the director, but how can you put your own creative influence on that to work with the director, work with the crew to create a certain style together, not as an individual. In this project, we're not looking for auteurs, and at an amateur level, auteurs never usually work. You know, it creates problems, creates arguments in the crew. Stick to what you know, do your research, work together on developing the themes and the ideas, and understand the narrative and the narrative flow of your job. Again, in the next few weeks, we're going to break the job roles down individually and talk about those more in detail.